So another video game studio bites the dust. This time it's Bluepoint Games, and that might sound like a callous way to talk about the closure of a studio that, in my opinion, had so much potential and sadly had that potential squandered by some questionable business decisions. But honestly, it speaks to where I'm currently at with it. I'm not apathetic, I still care, but I'm becoming numb to it, kind of like a defense mechanism, which is sad in its own way. Everything feels like it's kind of crashing down around us, and there's only so many times you can dig yourself out from under the rubble before it gets a bit much. It feels like in the world of video game development studios, whether they're big or small, are being cut or closed, and what I keep feeling is a sense of like frustration because all we really get after is these dispassionate justifications that annoyingly they dodge any sort of accountability or culpability. The people that are doing the most work at the whims of people who are like multiple steps removed from that grueling work are always the ones that are getting cast out into the barren wasteland of the video game industry jobs scene. I'm not a business expert. I'm not savvy with making decisions about running video game studios. I can barely decide what I want for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I imagine a lot of people watching this are the same, which is why now is the perfect time to convert to Islam, observe Ramadan, and fast. I'm kidding. Or am I? The amount of times I've seen this happen and then reverse engineered my way back to a decision made or trend chased or risk taken to find that the only reasonable takeaway is no shit, of course this was going to happen. It's frankly frightening. It shouldn't be this easy for people like me to see that a studio is closing and have a pretty good idea of what caused it because we keep seeing it time and time again. Kind of makes you think that the people who are being paid absurd amounts of money to make these decisions might not be as smart as we think they are or give them credit for. But this is not supposed to be a video about, verbal belt to ass for those people. There's plenty of other folks doing that. There's a few I like, one from Wavelengths. Kyle Bosman did a good one. Jeff Grubb on Game S was good, speaking about it. These videos, and there's a bunch more on articles, talk about how difficult it is to believe that Bluepoint wasn't a salvageable situation and how we're rapidly approaching this eventuality where game development in the US is so expensive that instead all of it's being outsourced to territories where it's much cheaper to get the same stuff done. It's not supposed to be one of those videos, but eventually I'm sure I'll work my way back to reinforcing how devastating it is that another studio was shut down. But for now, I want to talk about Bluepoint. I think Bluepoint did something that I think is really impressive and something I really don't think it gets enough credit for. And I'm probably going to get a lot of pushback about this, but it's just my opinion, it's something that I think about every now and then. Bluepoint made a launch title that I think might be the best launch title in PlayStation's history. And that game, surprise, surprise, Demon's Souls. Before we get to that, some scene setting to provide some context. Let's look back at the previous PlayStation launches and the games they came out with. So PlayStation 1 had Air Combat, Battle Arena Toshinden, ESPN Extreme Sports, NBA Jam, Tournament Edition, Rayman, there was Ridge Racer, I think Soul Calibur, Street Fighter, the movie, so not the good Street Fighter, Raiden Project, and there's probably a few I'm missing, but I felt like now I'm looking back at it and it looks weak as a lineup. I'm not saying these are bad games. I'm not saying that at the time they weren't exciting. I enjoyed playing NBA Jam and Rayman and Ridge Racer and Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur is one of my favorite games ever. But if we're being honest, they those games hardly left much of an impression. No one's like thinking wistfully about those games in the final days of the PlayStation 1's life. Again, some people might be upset at me for that, but it's just my opinion. PlayStation 2, Armored Core 2, I think it was. Dead or Alive 2, I think one of those. Dynasty Warriors 2, a lot of 2s. There was a track and field game. Evergrace, Kessin was there, I believe. Midnight Club, I think, was one of them. And Ready to Rumble. I'm trying to remember the important ones. Ridge Racer. There was another Ridge Racer at PlayStation. Silent Scope, SSX, Street Fighter, EX3. Tekken Tag Tournament, I think, was in that window as well. And, you know, PS2 is one of the greatest consoles of all time with an incredible library of games that I truly love. But again, how many of those would I call platform defining? Maybe one, I think. Time Splitters, that was one of them. Like, that is one that I think made a mark. But everything else kind of very forgettable. The PlayStation 3, rough times. Blazing Angels, Call of Duty 3, Genji, Days of the Blade. There was a Madden game, I think 07. Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Okay, decent. There's an NBA 2K7, I think. Resistance, Fall of Man, that's a big one. Another Ridge Racer 7, I think. And Tony Hawk's Project 8 was one of them. And apologies to all the Resistance Fall of Man fans, but sorry. PlayStation 4 is where it gets a bit better, to a degree. I'm not talking about Angry Birds Star Wars, of course. I'm talking about Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Battlefield 4, Blacklight Retribution, COD Ghosts was there. I think DC Universe was there at launch as well. Pretty cool. Flower. Injustice Ultimate Edition, I think, was there. Shadowfall, Killzone, obviously. Knack, Lego Marvel Superheroes. I'm just remembering all the games that I got in my pack of launch titles. NBA Rivals showed up a little bit after. I think there was like Sound Shapes and Warframe, I think, was the other major release around them. But the PS4 had a bunch of good titles for sure. But again, I think about back on them, I'm like, yeah, those were fun for a little bit at most. Not really, again, lasting impressions. The game that I think I played the most at PS4 launch was Resogun. And that was pretty much it. And again, if you're a Knack defender, please seek help. And that brings us to PlayStation 5. Spider-Man, Miles Morales. Sackboy, A Big Adventure, Destruction All-Stars, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Godfall, Black Ops Cold War. I guess you can count Fortnite, and Siege were there as well. Observer, Jet the Far Shore, Watch Dogs Legion, Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, Destiny was there. I think Cyberpunk came out like a week later. Still counts, and there was like a Dirt and an NBA 2K game. Of all the PlayStation launches, I think it's fair to say that the PS5 is easily the strongest of them. But I think in particular, there's two games that really stand out. One is Spider-Man Miles Morales, as I mentioned, and the other one is Demon's Souls, which was developed by Bluepoint. Spider-Man is excellent. I thoroughly enjoyed that game. Spider-Man fans, please chill. I like it. It is good. I have Spider-Man comics. I am excited for Wolverine. I played Sunset Overdrive. I like Insomniac's games, so chill. But Miles Morales was very much a known quantity in a lot of ways. It was exactly what I expected it to be. Might even call it predictable in many ways. It's the safe bet in that launch lineup. And I don't think of Demon's Souls as being the same. I don't think it's any of those. For me, like, Demon's Souls was something I never saw coming. And I think a lot of people, based on the reactions to the announcement video, didn't see it coming. It was a game that I firmly believe is the best PlayStation launch title ever. Maybe even the best launch title of all time, period. I'm sure you have your own picks, let me know. Of course, I'm predisposed to loving a Demon's Souls remake because, well, look around me. From the limited window you can see a lot of From Software stuff. But there's also a lot that genuinely made that game uniquely special as a launch title. And first and foremost, one of those things was it existed. Famously, Demon's Souls is the most niche of From Software titles, if not counting Kingsfield, obviously. And it didn't enjoy the same level of popularity as a Spider-Man game, for example, or more appropriately, Dark Souls, or any other From Software game since then. And that is despite it being, I think in my mind, as good as multiple other From Software games that they released after Demon's Souls. So pulling this one out of the vault wasn't something that I saw coming, and man, like I said, when that trailer dropped, it felt like a hallucination. I was like, what is happening? But more than that, Bluepoint and Japan Studio, I think, absolutely knocked it out of the park. I know there's some diehard fans in different corners of the Souls community that don't agree, and I appreciate that perspective around the atmosphere and the stuff that changes, kind of like, it messed with some things that you feel when you play that game. But for my money, I think it's as good a remake as I could have asked for, and I think it's excellent. I think it's so good, in fact, that it's a game. I think it's so good that it's a game that is as relevant today as it was the day it launched alongside the PlayStation 5. And what I mean by that is, it's a game that you can comfortably recommend to someone today, 6 years after the PlayStation 5 launched, without any qualifications other than this game is going to be hard. You're going to die a lot. Get good. And I don't think that's something that you can say for very many other launch titles on any PlayStation. I reviewed that game, and I think in my concluding paragraph I described it as like a technical tour de force and a true showpiece for the PlayStation 5 and the power of Sony's latest next-gen console. And what I want most from a game is for it to flex its capabilities, the capabilities of the hardware it's running on. I want to feel like this is a step forward, and Demon's Souls, for me, I think, is the only one that really did that, and it still remains for me the best showpiece of the PlayStation 5 for what that piece of hardware can do. It sells consoles better than most of the games being released today, both technically and artistically. It is stunning, and it plays so well too. Demon's Souls, I think the remake for PlayStation 5 is undoubtedly going to outlive the PS5. I'm willing to bet that years from now, PS6, PS7, PS8, wherever we're at, it's still going to feel contemporary in many ways. I think Bluepoint remade a bunch of games in the past, right? Some of them like Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, God of War Collection, Uncharted Collection, Gravity Rush, Flower. They've done those games, and the process was to make these beloved titles available to new audiences. And after so many successful remakes, the studio deserved, I think, more than just being put on a God of War live service game that nobody asked for that. And when it got canned, it just kind of left them scrambling for survival. Also, we did God of War multiplayer one time before, and it feels like no one remembers that, and it was awful. Like, I don't know why this is a thing, other than this is the strategy for PlayStation. Bluepoint should have been able to do so much more, so much sooner. But if they only ever existed to remake first-party titles as showpieces for the next PlayStation on the block, that should have been valuable, like pretty valuable to Sony. But more importantly, I think back to the concluding paragraph of my review, and in that I said, Demon's Souls Remake is coming from a studio that is clearly showing the world that it has its own voice. It was taking something that From Software in the original game expressed, and then made it richer and fuller. And in doing that, it pulled off something unbelievable, spectacular. It made me feel like I was playing it for the first time again. And the opportunity to relive a Souls game and fall in love with it all over again for the first time is, you can't put a price on that. That is like a rare, rare, rare thing. So I think back on Bluepoint, and what I think made Bluepoint such an impressive studio was its specialty wasn't just remaking games so they run on hardware you actually have plugged in. Its specialty was reinvigorating the soul of a game. It was taking games that you and I and anyone who loves games calls timeless, and remaking them so they really and truly stand the test of time. Shadow of the Colossus on PS4 was Bluepoint, and I think if you play that, it's an incredible experience. That game is going to stick around, and I think Demon's Souls and Shadow of the Colossus are proof of what Bluepoint really could do. And I feel like if you can't find a way to do something with that, or the institutional knowledge that it takes to do that well isn't important enough for you, that's a multifaceted and profound failing that should be attributed to more than just like nebulous business decisions and conditions in the market. That's the fault of bad decisions made by people who aren't willing to take responsibility for them. And I don't know, in my final moments, and I mean, Bluepoint's done now, but in their final moments, I hope that they realize that that Demon's Souls remake, man, it is incredible. It's something I keep on my hard drive on my PlayStation. Every now and then I just fire it up and marvel at it, and I'm just like, wow, this is still impressive all these years later. And I can't think of a single game on any PlayStation that I still do that for and have an interest in doing beyond any nostalgia hit I want. So here's to you, Bluepoint. You did good. You didn't get treated good, but you did good. And I hope you guys bounce back in some way that is more deserving of what you can do. Peace.